Morning. Before Blizzard was Blizzard, and before you could say Blizzard and breast milk in the same sentence, they were Silicon and Synapse. They made some games, apparently some pretty good games, though the racing game straight up has Judas Priest. You know, at least didn't race their homework. I wanted to see how a game from my childhood has held up. Was it any good? An extremely original idea, yes, and it has nothing to do with me justifying my financial choices. Lost Vikings was originally going to be a Lemmings knockoff, playing like a 2D Warcraft, but developing for the SNES made them realize that small 2-pixel high smudges might not be the most exciting stuff. So they cranked up the art style and then cranked some more because Alan Hadheim was colorblind. I don't think making the colors more intense helps with that. But from that, Blizzard was born. What I find interesting is that an argument could be made that Lost Vikings is from where the Blizzard trademark style was properly born. From the tongue-in-cheek humor and over-stylized characters to the ease of access. Alan saw a kid playing their game die and then immediately quitting the game, thus he vowed to never leave a child behind. How very 90s of him. Q ruled in Warcraft, taking over everything by just not being obtuse. Let's meet the Vikings. First off, we have Olaf, the big oaf with a shield. He mainly either stands around picking his nose, or he's floating about gracefully. He's just chill. Eric is the gotta go fast member of the group. He has mastered the ancient occult ability of pushing your feet against the ground really hard. He's also really good at giving head, as he can bring down walls and enemies. He is the MVP who'll spend most of the time screaming as Spike scrape his nuts getting stuff done. Guns, I couldn't remember his name quite frankly, mainly stands around and occasionally shoots stuff. Give Eric a slingshot and Gun would be out of a job, though he's really good at flexing his guns. I mean, he has plenty of time to practice, it's not like he's doing something else. Thrall's grandchild, Tomater, and his friends, the Croutons, seriously, kidnaps us to put us in his intergalactic zoo, and we have to find a way to escape back home by jumping through wormholes. The 4-part meta-analysis of the story of Lost Vikings is gonna be up soon. It's an iteration of the 90s Caveman Goes to Blockbuster and Gremlins in Space. There's 6 stages. We start out by having the Vikings wake up in the worst cell imaginable. If Caveman can walk out of your containment cell, then what the fuck are you doing? I guess Mr. Tomater is going through some funding issues, as he also uses analog bombs as weapons with apples and radishes as health items. The first stage is meant to ease you into it, but in reality you won't need any easing. Yes, it's not the game's fault that the gamers have spent the last few decades artistically min-maxing their neck width, but the main gameplay loop for the first 2 stages is move each of the Vikings individually from point A to point B, one at a time, then repeat. Since the Vikings weren't finalized by the time they started designing the levels, they had to make sure any lemming could handle it. And the enemies are, well, there's snails, and there's an infant T-Rex, and this annoying rolling shit who's immune to attacks whilst he's rolling. Move all up front, guns pew pew, and then repeat. Luckily the levels themselves are gorgeous, especially if you came from the PC where most games looked worse than a Casio calculator and sounded doubly as bad. If you played enough of Commander Keen, you'd end up under a bridge with interesting fellows discussing the optimal floor to book a room at. It's rather fun to run through the levels the first time. You even get to hop over Lake Coca-Cola. With the help of bubbles and blowing up an entire screen is never gonna be dull. The finale has us saving a voodoo booby lady from a cage who calms down a volcano, somehow. And then we proceed to train the entire volcano, somehow, to get to the wormhole at the base. And then we see the definitive proof that helmets are effective as the Vikings yet again fall from God knows how high on their necks. Welcome to ancient Egypt. Egypt has these scorpions who as a child kept fucking me up. But you can actually just stand right in front of them. As my mama always said, I'm the brightest rock in a coal mine. Then there's also Tut's personal guard who will, one way or another, jump over you and shank you in the kidneys. The solution is not strategy, just embrace your inner Englishman and shank them over and over again. At the end of the levels, the Vikings have little chats and they are jam-packed with cultural references. It's game over, man. Egypt is a fun place, if a bit shabby. The main hallways have rocks falling from the ceiling. They start giving the Vikings stuff to do. A level now requires Olaf to float below to get a key, as the two other guys go up top through mummies who punch like kittens with mittens on. The cutest undead minion? Maybe so. Egypt also has puzzles. Match 3 things and you're done. Later they try to be clever with it and make stuff fall on you when you input the wrong answer, but Olaf cares not for your shit. But then an issue. Runtime, if you may. The Sega Genesis version had extra levels for each stage and the arcade collection includes them. And they are absolute dog shit. At best they are okay, but they prolong the stages, making them overstay their welcome like in the previous stage. But in Egypt and the next stage, the bonus levels are outright low-grade compost. In the first part of the level you need to juggle 2 Vikings really fast, something which is rather clunky to do. Now I'm not fighting the game, the challenge, but the engine itself. And then there's a wall turret shooting fireballs at you, and in front of it, high above, is the blue key you need to exit. How do you think you get it? The start highlighted rapidly swapping between Vikings, so I tried to use Olaf to boost Eric and then quickly block, but no fucking way that's happening. You also can't bash in the wall itself, as you could already do a few times before. No, you have to do a running jump. The game, to my knowledge, hasn't shown this, nor has it been used before. And the issue is that there's only about 4 places in the entire game where you need it, and every time it's obtuse enough that it seems like the game broke or you missed something. After all, a large open level means a large chance of missing stuff. The game has switches, we use plenty of those switches, maybe there's a secret wall somewhere, I don't know. And no, I didn't have Mario to know that you can sprint jump. The bonuses are like getting gifted a luxury car and then going bankrupt from the resulting taxes. But it says something that this is one of the only things you could criticize the game for. Thankfully, the stage ends with a fun Tetris match as Eric once again jumps for dear life. And hey, Factory, the best stage in the game. The designers have found their groove, finally, and yeah, it has that extra shit bonus level, but it requires you to do that jump again. I even unknowingly tried to do the running jump, but I'm a millisecond off and later end up try humping a level geometry oddity. But Factory has the best enemy, or used to, the Snoot Trooper. My disappointment was immeasurable when I found out that it wasn't the bloke with a giant nose shooting boogers, but instead a bloke in a hazmat suit with a normal pew-pew launcher. The other enemies are Pac-Man after eating a few too many pills, and that one flying gnome unit from Warcraft. An awesome level is where Eric has to jump over a long spike pit so that he could give vision for guns to shoot an arrow, creating a floor for Olaf. The game runs on the proprietary Peekaboo Baby engine, stuff on screen doesn't exist. This applies for guns as arrows as well. Thus you need to use the character's swamp swoop animation to make sure that the arrow is not deciding to say fuck it and blink itself out of existence. Now Olaf can go and float about as Guns takes the elevator. How pedestrian. And Eric once again screams for dear life, falling nuts first. This stage also has the Vikings practicing being a U-Haul driver, and hey, Olaf is big enough to count his stuff. Let's dangle him over some electrocution, and we're using fabricators to build stuff which culminates in a glorious explosive finale. And so we end up in Candyland, a stage which should be good. I mean, it looks rather cool, and it has this adorable Snoot Troop Note creature chewing us. Love him. But the gimmick for the stage is floating, slowly both ways uphill and with blind jumps which will most likely kill you, making you hover for dozens of minutes slowly. Yeah, there's a cool enemy that's a clone of guns, and the Vikings are living up to their individual mechanical potential in these cool looking places. But then you float. Then there's a chocolate level. We can call this the game sewer level and cross that off the list. What makes it worse is that the stage made me actually quite literally feel loopy and physically ill. Like no shit, I was feeling nauseous. Whether it's the music or the color scheme, it's bringing back memories, and I promise to behave. At the end of the stage we drop a boulder on Olaf and then have a time challenge type final dash, where each of the Vikings have to do what they do best and give an electrifying final performance or get electrocuted. And thus, high on the sweet white sugar, we get back to where it started. Well, the second place it started, Starship. It's time to kick tomatoes' unripe ass and make it ripe. The game has built up your skills, you better have been taking notes because it's time to take a test. A massive multi-pronged level with multiple crisscrossing paths. In the first level you were asked to simply jump once and then walk. Here, first Olaf needs to float down, get a bomb, blow up a computer and then get a key. Then Eric needs to bounce all the way to the other side on springs to get a bomb and then scout for guns, who has to dodge a jellyfish to then shoot a trigger. Then Eric can get a key to bomb yet another wall. At this point he really should be on a list, so that finally Olaf, me, could get tricked by all the health items and not have inventory space left over for a fucking key. Fuck you, whoever you are, I am mailing you apples with soggy insides. Best level in the entire game, hands down. In fact, the level is actually so good that the remaining levels in comparison just fade away. One of the levels has you once again slowly rising and falling with gravity lifts as incredibly annoying enemies shoot at you slowly. It's also one of the longest levels where at the end there's a rather tight threading of the needle. If any of the Vikings dies, it starts slowly floating again as I did after 20 minutes. And finally, at last, we reach the final fight. Olaf goes first in the bombing runs. Then Guns wiggles his platform as he eats all of the bombs. And finally, Eric, as per usual, does most of the work as he faces Tomato face to face and straight up headbutts him into an electric fence, making him run to his room crying about it. Then in phase 2 we strategically place Olaf on the edge as bombs and laser blasts come at him. He does not care, come if they may, he is Olaf. Then I assume that Tomato shield functions like a personal shield as Guns' arrow just destroys it, and then Eric bashes his face into the situation and once again Tomato is left crying about it. But now he's cornered, we open the roof and he flies away, most likely to form a warband somewhere. The Vikings try to get home, but whoops, wrong button and the ship blows up. But no worries, they still get home to their children who are doing infinite squats. The dads brought home some instruments and they are ready to rock out to some credits. Which remind me of the one in Frozen Throne. There's so much character and personality. Despite some pacing issues and the fucking bonus levels, it was a rather charming game. Each stage has its own little intro cinematic as well, though each stage having exactly one short loop of hype music is a recipe for going insane. And it turns out there's even a sequel for it. Hopefully this little Silicon and Synapse company will continue being this cool little company that they are now and not get their brains snapped by interdimensional nefarious greed demons from the infinite abyss. Oh no.